Happy Sunday. Welcome to my channel on all things on our mini homestead. Today I want to share with you what my sourdough prep and bake days look like during the week, so follow along. In a typical work week, I cover several different shifts and I found that Wednesdays work best for me to start prepping all of my doughs. Coming off of a graveyard shift on Wednesday, I typically get home around 7 in the morning and I like to immediately start emptying out our kitchen stove. I've been baking with sourdough for over a year now and I just recently found a hack to help my starter grow faster. I like to set the oven to the lowest temperature settings and in the meantime I'll feed my starter. I like to use the 1:1 ratio when feeding my sourdough starter, which basically means same parts flour, same parts water to same parts starter. I like to go in with a wooden spoon to mix everything in well and then follow it up with the baking spatula to scrape the sides off the jar. This is completely unnecessary, but it helps keep the jar clean, plus I can keep a better eye on how much she grows. If there's any starter on my spoons, I'll wipe off as much as possible with paper towels before putting it in the sink. After the oven has finished preheating, I'll set my jar on top of the stove and turn on the oven light. This trick will help speed up growth and is great for colder days where it normally takes all day for the starter to double. In the meantime, I'll go lay down and sleep for a few hours. I normally wake up around noontime, which gives my starter about 4 to 5 hours to rise and double in size. As you can see here, leaving my starter on top of the stove, she has more than doubled. I mean, I'll take a super active bubbly starter, but now I have some extra cleaning to do. I'm starting off with prepping my sourdough bowl since it's typically an all-day process. Right now I'm only offering original, which keeps my recipe simple. Water, salt, starter, and flour. I'm using a dough hook to mix the ingredients, but once the dough starts to become harder to manage, I'll go in with my hands to continue mixing. It can get a little messy in the beginning, but the longer I play with the dough, it'll start to hold its shape and I'll be able to form it into a ball. Once the dough starts holding its shape, I'll form it into a ball and cover it with a wet tea towel and set it aside for at least an hour or longer. Around 5, I'll come back and start my stretch and folds. I like to use two different methods, which consist of stretch and folds and coil and folds. Once I'm done with my stretch and folds, I'll cover her back up with a wet tea towel and set her aside for about 30 minutes to an hour. I'll do my second set of stretch and folds and coil and folds. Cover her back up, set her aside for another 30 minutes to an hour. In the meantime, I'll clean out the jar and transfer my starter to another smaller clean jar. I have another baby jar of starter in my fridge. I keep her as a backup just in case my main one goes bad. It's never a bad idea to have a backup. And I'll give her another feeding so I can make the dough for my bagels. Around 6:30, I'll come back and do my set of stretch and folds and coil and folds. Cover her back up, set her aside for another 30 minutes to an hour. I do a total of 4 stretch and folds in the span of 2 hours in increments of 30 minutes. After the last set of stretch and folds, I'll cover her up and put her on the counter to bulk ferment for about an hour or so. It is now 8:40 and my dough has doubled in size. And now I can separate her into 4 portions and weigh each one and give them their first shape. Once I'm done shaping all of the bowls, I'll cover it up with a wet tea towel and let it bench rest a little longer. My starter has doubled and is super bubbly after the last feeding, and I can now use my sourdough starter to make my dough for my bagels. My sourdough bagel recipe is super simple. All it calls for is water, salt, honey, sourdough starter, and flour. I'll use my KitchenAid to mix the dough together as it is a little harder on my hands. Once my bagel ingredients are well incorporated, I'll roll it up into a ball and cover it up with a wet tea towel and set it aside overnight. I end the night by shaping my sourdough bowls once again and then tuck them into their bannetons. I like to cover them up with saran wrap under the cloth just to keep them from drying out. I'll place them in the fridge overnight for a cold ferment. The next day I like to wake up around 7 in the morning and place my Dutch ovens inside the oven and preheat it to 500 degrees. In the meantime, I'll take my cookie dough from the freezer that I had prepped 3 days prior. I'll take this time to weigh and shape my cookies and then put them all back into the freezer. Once my oven finishes preheating, I'll lower the temperature to 450 degrees and I'll take out the first 2 sourdough bowls and score them. I'll bake my sourdough bowls with the lid on for the first 30 minutes. After After 30 minutes, I'll come back and take the lids off and bake them for an additional 15 minutes. Around 8:45 in the morning, my first 2 loaves will be done, and I'll let them cool on the counter and throw in the other 2 loaves and repeat. Around 9, I'll start prepping my bagels. As you can see, my bagel dough has doubled in size and I can cut them into 16 portions. I'm making 8 plain bagels and I'm making 8 jalapeno cheddar bagels. Once I'm done shaping all of the bagels, I'll set them on top of the stove and cover them up with a wet tea towel to let them rise. Meanwhile, I'll take my cookies out of the freezer, line my baking sheets, and set my cookies. Around 10, my sourdough bowls are done baking and I can preheat my oven to 375 degrees to bake my cookies. I'll place all 4 baking sheets into the oven and bake my cookies for about 12 minutes, making sure to rotate them midway. Once they're all done, I'll set them aside and let them cool on the counter and preheat my oven for the bagels. In a pot of water, I'll add brown sugar and baking soda and bring to a boil. I'll place my bagels and boil them on each side for about 1 minute and then place them on a baking sheet. Once I have all of my bagels on the baking sheet, I'll go ahead and place them inside of the oven and repeat the same process for my jalapeno cheddar bagels. The only difference is once I remove them from the pot of boiling water into the baking sheet, I'll add my jalapeno and cheese toppings before adding them into the oven. I'll also rotate my bagels from the bottom rack to the top rack. And once they're all done, I'll let them cool on the counter. By 1 o'clock, I'm done baking all of my sourdough loaves, my chocolate chip cookies, and my sourdough bagels. It may all seem like a long process, but for me, it helps slow time down and shut my mind off. Thank you for following along. If you like what you see, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Till next time, happy baking, my friends.